Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to episode 8 of Radio Free Artona. We just kind of jumped right into it and didn't record the normal intro, so I thought I'd throw this in. This episode, we're talking about the Queen and what she meant to us, and then we move on to why capitalism doesn't seem to be very popular with the young fellas, the Zoomers and stuff. One note in this episode, we're talking about the constitutional monarchies in the context of our conversation with about the Queen. We were talking about how constitutional monarchies seem to be a little resistant to overthrow from authoritarian dictatorships. And we were talking about various constitutional monarchies around the world. And we did mention Thailand. And I forgot until after we'd done recording the episode that Thailand did suffer a coup in 2014 that installed the current military junta that is in power there. And that was their 12th coup since 1932. So I think Patty's point on it is still valid, but at best, Thailand is the exception that proves the rule, perhaps. So if I had remembered during the episode, I certainly would have tried to push back on that point, if only for the sake of objectivity, I guess. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the episode. And again, thanks for tuning in.
So I guess the genesis of this was a study or an article that a majority of young people
It was.
think socialism is good and capitalism is bad.
Yes. But before we talk about that and get into this, I want to talk about the Queen.
All right.
Okay.
Just and I just spring it on because I just people
It is timely.
can't because of the timing because we're doing this a week after.
Yeah. Her funeral's
Funerals
tomorrow.
Yeah. So, just your feelings. We all three of us have taken oaths to the lady.
As noted, I went and looked up the oath,
Yeah.
and it does include loyalty to her heirs,
Yes. Yeah,
expected.
Heirs and successors.
Yeah.
Yeah. As I actually found out on Facebook, of all places, someone just said, "Holy shit, the Queen has died." And I think I'd read earlier that day or the day before that she was, under doctor's orders.
Yeah, that they had called the family.
Yeah.
Gather round.
And then it happened so fast. And it's been a slow recognition, very profound, of what she has meant to me. And it's just bizarre. It's bizarre saying the word king. It's bizarre hearing people say, God save the king. God save the king is something from 100 years ago.
Yeah, or talking about wearing the king's kit.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is the wrong freaking word to be in there. It's
On Friday.
Oh, the court of King's Bench.
Yeah, King's Bench. Yeah.
Fuck off.
Yeah. A young, like they have a program at work where you can wear civilian clothes on Friday, casual Fridays. And I was chiding the corporal for doing that. And he said, well, it's comfortable. I said, why would I get my own clothes dirty and wear them? Or put wear on them?
You work in a cubicle.
When I can, why should I get the seat of my pants thin when I can get the seat of the Queen's pants thin? And he said, you can't say that anymore. I said, yeah, you're right. I'll get the King's pants thin. But yeah, it's going to take some getting used to. Definitely.
Yeah.
We'll talk about, now we got to talk about the King's English.
Yeah.
It's not her English anymore.
Which all speaks to the fact that it's always been the Queen.
Yeah.
It's always been all these things. It's always been
70 years, right?
Yeah.
And for us, that's literally been our lifetime.
Lifetime.
For my parents, that's been.
Well, it's my parent. My dad. My
their-
dad was born 2 years before she became queen, right? Like,
It's just the whole concept of her not being there anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not having
That
her
constant stabilizing influence.
her picture on the wall
Yeah.
in any government office. And it doesn't matter who her successor is. It happens to be Charles, and we're all going to have opinions about and
Yeah.
about
You're right.
Charles.
No matter who it is, that's huge shoes to fill.
And yeah, I think it's like you said, it's that consistency, that stability, and the grace, and
Yes.
and she defined
Yes.
nobility like as a
Yes.
word.
Yeah.
I just
She's kind of like we've all lost our national grandmother.
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, that's kind of the way I feel about it. I feel like I have lost my grandmother all over again.
Well, and that's
Even though I didn't know her.
Yeah, and that's probably given the position the monarchy serves within our own, within the Commonwealth, within us. You know, like national grandmother is probably the best position for the Queen. Kind of, it's some kind of right.
Yeah,
But she-
with some authority, but not really
Well,
any
grandmother
authority.
has
but
Moral authority. In the
Yeah, there's-
exact same way that your grandmother did. Your
Exactly.
grandmother, for the most part, wasn't going to grab you, forcibly yank you by the arm, and lay a belt to you.
'Cause she didn't have to.
She didn't have to.
No.
No,
She
there's-
had moral authority.
They were talking to some of the people in the lineup this year, and it was mind blowing. It's been very gratifying, actually. It's been very cathartic to realize how many people are there. It's like they're proxies for me. They actually spoke to some Canadians in the lineup who said that they decided they had to be there.
Yeah.
And my immediate knee-jerk reaction is, well, who the hell needs to be there, right? And even before I finished that thought, I thought, you know what? I kind of want to be there.
Yeah.
Because you're right, we never met her. But this would be my only chance, not just to say goodbye to her, but to have been in her presence. It felt very important. The possibility to be there, you know. So yeah, you haven't said much, Steve. Sorry.
No, I
As
was just
usual,
curious about your guys' feelings on it. I'm very positively disposed to the Queen, more so than I am to the monarchy. Not that the monarchy is a real big influence, given, like I said, given the way the government is structured. But libertarians don't tend to look very fondly on monarchies. But
It's true.
But the Queen, and I don't really have a position or an issue with the position of the monarchy, like I say, as it's structured in our government, or you know, in the Commonwealth, right? Like there's no huge power. I think the Queen did a valuable service. As somebody, it was Mark Stein was talking to Megyn Kelly, and he said one of the great things the Queen did, I think, and this is more so in the UK than here or anywhere else, was that she diminished politicians. Her presence
Yes.
was a diminishment to the Prime Minister, right? Right. So he wasn't the figure that he is here, right?
Peterson said something similar to that as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen his response, but but that seemed a valuable service, right?
Can I? You want to do an interesting libertarian thought experiment for a moment?
Okay.
Think in your mind for the next 15 seconds, in your head, how many constitutional monarchies can you think of? In about 15 seconds.
I can only think of one. There's more. No, I guess no. Sorry, I should.
Okay, we'll just rattle them off.
Because you can go, I guess, Sweden's a constitutional monarchy. Denmark.
Yep.
You can basically rattle your way through Europe.
Holland.
Yeah.
How about Spain?
Yes, because they had to restore the monarchy to ease the transition from fascism back
How
to
about
democracy.
Japan?
Yeah.
Thailand?
That's
Constitutional.
I suppose it's a constitutional monarchy. It's not an
absolute monarchy.
It's not-
Not like, say,
But the king,
Brunei.
the king in Thailand has a
Brunei,
lot more power than
True.
than other monarchies.
True.
Current monarchies.
Obviously, the UK.
Yeah.
Now, how many constitutional monarchies in the last 250 years have endured a period of authoritarian dictatorship that
Japan.
wasn't imposed upon them from without? Japan's only been a constitutional monarchy since 45.
That's right. Okay, yeah. It was an outright monarchy before.
Trick
It's
question.
an absolute
Monarchy
monarchy.
before, yeah. But they did have a parliament. No, it was a constitution because they had
Well, it was more a military junta.
right because Tojo was prime minister.
Yeah, but you see,
right?
this
and
is-
there was
yeah.
a parliament that maybe
But
didn't have a
it
whole lot of
wasn't
power. But
technically,
Yeah.
The emperor had absolute power, but
was a
you
god
could
emperor,
do that all the way back to, even before the Meiji Restoration, where the shogun had the real power, who ruled in the name of the emperor.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really a constitutional monarchy in the sense that it became in 45.
That's true.
But if you like, we could throw that in there and say Japan.
Yeah. But that's probably about it, right?
Okay, how many republics can you name that have not descended into a period of authoritarian dictatorship in the last 250 years?
One. Yeah.
How many more republics are there that compared to constitutional monarchies? 10 to 1, 12 to 1, 13 to 1?
Could be.
So obviously, there's, again, correlation, not causality,
Yeah.
but there is something about constitutional monarchies that tends to vouchsafe the civil liberties and rights of its citizens. They seem to be resistant to authoritarianism.
Yeah. Well, if the monarchy, because if the monarchy remains important to the citizens, and then that puts brakes on the desire. That automatically puts brakes on the desire for revolutionary change.
Yeah, it seems to. Now, and
as long as the monarchy can stay popular.
And of course, all constitutional monarchies are very different.
Yeah.
The rules surrounding Japan's are very different than the ones surrounding Holland, which are different than the ones surrounding Sweden.
Yeah.
So there seems to be something, which are different than the rules around Spain's. So there seems to be something about the concept of a constitutional monarchy in and of itself that makes it resistant to dictatorship. So that's something I think, I heard a great phrase the other day, which I really liked, which was tradition is the solution, or traditions are the solutions to problems you no longer notice.
Right.
You remove those traditions, the problems come back. The monarchy, constitutional monarchy, is a solution to a political problem. So that's my thoughts on the monarchy in general.
Very interesting.
No, that's a very good point.
But-
And tradition is inherently conservative, right? So
Generally.
right, like
Unless
not
you-
small,
but again-
small c conservative, but it's generally like
It's associated with conservatism.
Right,
But there are leftist traditions.
sure, but they're still traditional. I mean, I guess you become a conservative leftist when
You could be a very conservative leftist.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
I guess we would use the term an orthodox leftist. I
suppose,
or,
yeah.
Or
Well, I think-
a doctrinaire leftist.
Isn't it the way I remember that spectrum is supposed to be? Left, right is one spectrum. The other one is radical versus reactionary, right? So there can be reactionary leftists. There can be reactionary rights.
Yeah,
And radical left and radical right. So,
yeah. I suppose reactionary is probably the more traditional term. But
yeah, for traditional.
Well, reactionary means a very burning and pressing desire to return to previous conditions, I believe.
I think that's always been my impression of it.
I'm
My
gonna check Google.
assumption on the term.
I will check Oxford.
My assumption of the term is that it reacts to change negatively. Essentially.
That's an interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I thought it was not just reacting to change not just reacting to change negatively, but to desire a change in and of itself. Okay, in political science, according to our good friends at Wikipedia, a reactionary is a person who holds political views that favor a return to the status quo ante, the previous political state of society, which that person believes possessed positive characteristics absent from contemporary society. Okay.
You heard it here, folks.
There you are.
that's along the lines of what we said.
Yeah, along the lines. Yeah. That is not just resistance to change. It wants to go back to a previous condition.
Status quo. It's not just maintaining a current status quo.
Yeah, with the status quo ante. So there you go.
Yeah.
So, does that
All
cover?
right.
Does that cover the monarchy?
I think that covers the Queen. We
I
mess
think
her.
it was a good idea. We do. There's no question.
We don't hold. I don't know. I don't know about her. We probably shouldn't really get into our feelings about Charles. I'm not.
No.
No.
I do think that it's going to be one of those events where we define our world before and after. certain markers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but just your statement or your thing about like the nation's grandma.
Yeah.
It's like that almost describes her role perfectly, right?
Yeah.
Because she also like was like when you want to hold up the position of public servant, right? Because she worked very hard
Absolutely.
at being of service in whatever way she could, even if it was like ribbon cuttings and stuff like
Yes,
menial,
she did. She
right?
did.
So, and knowing that she came from a place of immense privilege and wealth, but she worked very hard, and I don't. And it's unfortunate, and I think that's just a reality of parenting that stuff doesn't get passed down to your children the way, right?
Yeah, you're not.
Like she was such a
They
great
made her.
woman,
They
but her
broke
kid,
the mold, man.
yeah. Well, she was such a wonderful woman, and then her kids are so rotten.
Well,
it's just like,
yeah, but you know what? We can say that about so many.
but it's just, I think it's just a truism of parenting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Right,
just blame Prince Philip.
Yeah. For all we know, I think we may come to use the term Elizabethan to describe the ideal of public service.
Yeah.
You know, someone may rise. You know, we may say, you know, that individual was a public servant or a public figure of Elizabethan proportions, and we're going to use that as the penultimate.
Well, we have to say
compliment.
modern Elizabethan.
Nope. It's going to become.
She's going to usurp her ancestors.
Yes. I think it will come to be just understood. You know, because I think her reputation will grow with time.
Yeah.
Her as much as she is admired or was admired during her life, I think she will be admired even more in memory.
Yeah.
As time goes on, you don't appreciate something until it's gone.
Well, absolutely. I think that's definitely where we're going to.
And that's what we're going to be with Elizabeth. No doubt about it.
I kind of have a feeling, and not to over dramatize it or anything, but I was going to say, it almost feels like we're having our own Kennedy moment. And it's not a moment. I'm not talking about the moment I heard the news. It's, as I described, it's more the impact of, the profound impact of it since then.
Yep.
But that's how, the level at which I imagine the impact of Kennedy's assassination is. The death of the Queen has been massive.
Yep.
And the other thing I would add, I don't dispute the concept as you guys presented it, which is the public service, because obviously she was a public servant, but she was also a leader. She was a very good leader.
She was. Yes.
And the people would look to her.
Yes.
Whenever there was a crisis. During COVID,
Yep.
she came out and made an address. Every Christmas, she came out and gave an address. People expected that. And that's not just tradition. That's,
in a time of crisis,
it had a purpose.
We very much wanted to hear what the Queen had to say about it. And her words of calm and, how would you say, stoicism,
and
unification, they were important.
Yeah.
They were. I know it sounds, you can easily dismiss it and say it sounds trite. But no, it was a powerful, like when I think about the COVID time and her address, in regards to that, it was important.
No.
It was unifying, absolutely. Say, here's the richest woman on the planet. And, she's dealing with the same stuff. Mm-hmm. It was a unifying, absolutely a unifying moment. Yeah, we will not see her like again.
Nope. Not for a long time.
No, not for a long time.
Not in our life.
Which is kind of
we got
depressing.
2 kings. We got 2 kings to go. So
yeah.
Well, that's something else I was thinking about the monarchy.
It's kind of a sad
way
thought, isn't it?
Of dragging the monarchy into there probably has to be some legislative change in the UK, but maybe they should make the heir to the throne just the firstborn period, regardless of what gender it is.
I believe that is the case.
that is the case.
I believe
Is
it's
it?
the case. Yes.
Yeah, that's how she became.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't have any brothers, does she? I don't think so. She
No,
has
right.
You're saying.
I believe it is the case that the firstborn is the heir, regardless of gender.
Well,
so you're saying that George VI had.
Well, because the only reason she became queen
if Margaret
is
had been a
because
boy,
The ruler,
Edward abdicated, right?
Right.
And so then her father became king.
yeah,
King George VI.
Right. And then he died, she became queen.
yeah.
But she doesn't have any brothers.
No,
Right.
she
So
has
you're
a
saying
sister.
if
Or
Margaret-
So she's the firstborn. Yeah.
Yes.
But you're saying if Margaret, her younger sister, had been a boy, he might have been king.
He would, because he's the firstborn son.
I think he would have been at that time. However, I believe the secession legislation
Has been
now
changed.
specifies
Has been changed, so it's
Yes.
just the firstborn.
and it hasn't been changed for some time.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to us.
Like
because
the
it's not.
70s.
It's going to be irrelevant to us unless
It'll be, yeah.
Charles, William, and Harry
Dying
and
of
their
crash.
kids.
Well, no, it would be George.
Exactly, and their
Yeah.
kids.
George
Then
would
it
have
goes
to
to
die.
Andrew. Then to which one is it?
I believe it-
Eugenie or Beatrice.
Oh no, it would go. Oh, right. If William, Harry, George, and Charles all die
Yeah,
in a freak bowling accident,
yeah.
then yes, it would go to
Goes
Andrew.
to Andrew. Then,
then
whichever of his daughters. I
They
can't
would go to
remember
him,
which one
and
is
then it
first.
would go to his first daughter,
Yeah.
Beatrice, perhaps. I don't know, or Eugenie. I don't
I can't
know
remember which
one.
one's
Yeah, I
first.
think Beatrice was first.
I don't know which one, but yes, it would go. It would go to them.
It's Sarah Ferguson to be the queen mom.
Yes, she would.
Bless her, I love a ginger.
Yes. You know what? I got to say that
And she loves you too.
she handled.
She doesn't even know.
Yeah. You know what? I wouldn't have a problem with that.
No.
I think Sarah Ferguson is a pretty classy individual. She hasn't done anything to discredit herself or you know.
Well,
Sex scandal.
and we would hope that Andrew advocated after her.
Yeah, I
He's-
think.
he-
Well, I think. Thank God we're speaking
he took one or
hypotheticals.
two rides down on the Lolita Express. So.
He has really.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, there would be uproar.
Yeah.
yeah.
There would be.
But we're way into the weeds on that now. So
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
moving on from the Queen. So the reason we're actually here,
Yep.
as Patty talked about earlier, was an Instagram post I had sent out.
You have it
from
good,
Vice.
Good. Of course, Vice, that paragon of journalism.
They're not as bad as you think, but you got there's a lot there. But there's some good people there, like Michael Moynihan and stuff is a decent guy
Okay.
there. But yeah. But anyway, this was not necessarily something that Patty and I were going to agree with, but it was interesting, and so I sent it out to the guys. And the headline from the Instagram post is "Young People Officially Despise Capitalism," studies show. And this is the quote, the post. Capitalism famously has ruined everything. For young people, the subject to the sharp end of the Great Recession and the pandemic, exponential increases in the cost of living, and Tinder bios that read, "just looking for someone to hold hands with at the revolution." Capitalism is understandably incredibly unpopular. One Harvard study found that more than 50% of young people across the U.S. reject capitalism, while a 2018 Gallup poll showed that 45% of young Americans saw capitalism favorably, a dramatic fall from 68% in 2010.
Sorry, what was the unfavorable number?
Well, it'd be 45.
That more than 50% of young people across the U.S. reject capitalism, while a 2018 Gallup poll showed that 45% of young Americans saw capitalism favorably. So theoretically, 55% view it unfavorably.
Right.
Similarly, according to a recent research by the Institute for Economic Affairs, nearly 8 out of 10 young people in the UK blame capitalism for the housing crisis, with 2/3 expressing a desire to live under an explicitly socialist economic system. On top of this, 75% of those polled believe the climate emergency is specifically a capitalist problem, with 72% in support of a sweeping nationalization of private services. Mm-hmm. And that's the end of the post. So when I saw that, I texted a screenshot of that to the boys, and I said, "We've done."
Here's some red meat. Here's some red meat.
Yeah, and I said, "So I think we've been doing a bad sales job for capitalism."
Yeah.
And Trent's response is, "What's this we?"
Yes, I remember that.
Or what do you mean we?
Yeah, what do you mean we? White man.
White man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to leap right in and say it's because they really don't know what socialism is. They don't know what capitalism is. They've been taught through the indoctrination system we call public education that socialism means simply being fair and kind and compassionate. And that capitalism simply means being greedy, being selfish, being cruel Darwinian law of the jungle. they really have no idea beyond that what these terms actually mean. To them, it's an emotional, vague, esoteric concept. Like, for example, we talked about this earlier, where they say, well, no, Scandinavia is not socialist. Socialism is where the state controls the means of production. State owns and controls the means of production. When many people who would think of themselves as pro-socialist don't hold that view at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. I was going to say, bring that up as well.
Yeah.
That even we
Yeah.
throw that word around for our own reasons.
Yeah. What Steve and I thought of as socialism was very different than what you thought of as socialism.
Yeah. So it was good that we clarified that. So I agree. Like if
Yeah,
three old salts like us needed to take some time to figure that out, guaranteed.
Yeah, guaranteed. Young people who haven't been told a word of truth in the first 18 years of their lives, how the hell are they possibly going to be informed on the subject?
I question the objectivity of that statement.
Are we each here to be objective? I mean, he and I clearly are pro-capitalist.
Okay,
you are the.
Okay,
what do you mean, we white man?
Let me rephrase. Before we go down that explicit rabbit hole,
about the long march to the institutions?
Well, I mean, okay. Actually, I wanted to bring this up regarding Norway because we were talking specifically about
Scandinavia,
social democracy, welfare state versus socialism, right? Again, mostly anecdotal, but I believe Norway actually fits under the socialist model that you guys describe: state ownership of the resources.
But
not all firms.
Statoil, Statoil, you can say is a socialist enterprise in the way that Petro-Canada was a socialist enterprise at its conception because it's a crown corporation, specifically started as a crown corporation.
Yeah. But if and again, this is I don't have any actual stats on this. My understanding is that the money from Statoil goes from the government and is given out as royalties to the people of Norway.
I don't know about that either. But
they do get some kind of benefit of it.
So, like a doctrinaire socialist economy would be like Cuba,
would have no private enterprise.
Yeah, or like the Soviet Union, where there was no private enterprise. Everything was.
Okay, now you're talking Stalinist and Leninist.
No, that's
right?
classic socialism, classical socialism,
or Marxism.
Yeah, or Marxism, communism, all of these iterations of the same concept were a centrally planned economy where, like the term like limited liability company.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in Russian, but in East Germany it was like VEB, Volkseigene Betrieb. In other words, a people's owned company where literally everything from the corner store to the manufacturing concern that, say, churned out bicycles, everything was owned by the state. So that is the textbook definition of socialism, and that's generally a definition that's only held by conservatives these days.
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I have yet to meet someone who is of left-wing persuasion that thinks of that when they hear the word socialism.
So, because for what you've described to me is communism, right?
Communism, socialism, I think those are artificial distinctions.
So I'm not going to claim anything at this point. I will express my impression of it the whole way along.
Sure.
Is that socialism is not
total ownership, centrally planned economy
of everything.
Yeah.
Right? It does not exclude private ownership of businesses. Right. It just happens to nationalize at least some things.
Say at least have what's the phrase? The controlling heights of the economy? Or at the very least, certain key industries owned by the state and a very large and thorough regulatory system. Or regulatory presence.
Probably, but not necessarily. But when I think of, say, if you look at Spain in the 30s, there was a very huge distinction between the Socialist Party and the Communist Party. And then all the offshoots of the Communist Party that there were, like the POUM and... Right? And the Trotskyists. Right? So, to me, again, I'll go look at this, maybe starting there and kind of seeing what the differences were between them. But socialism, as I've always understood, okay, we've had that discussion. And we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole either, because we've already strayed from our main topic, like we do. So I need to go back and see that. But I just wanted to bring that up because I was like, hey, wait a minute. You guys said, okay, socialism this, welfare state that.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it seems to me Norway actually fits the description of what you guys were talking about.
I kind of like to look at, especially in the Canadian context, welfare, when the province distributes cash disbursements to people who qualify for living allowances or whatever, right? We call that welfare. Yep. That's something the private sector doesn't do at all. So to me, that's part of the differentiation of between welfare and socialism. Whereas when you look at the healthcare system, right, the state or the province controls all the access, all the provision, all the infrastructure.
100% of the
healthcare system is controlled by the state. It could be done by the private sector because we can see it can be done by the private sector in other countries. That's socialism. So it would apply to the UK system as well, right? So Canada isn't a socialist country, but we have this thing that is socialist in the country, right? Versus, but welfare is distinct from that, right?
Okay.
So,
you could call,
and that's not like the totality of I think what the
you could call
they're handy reference points.
Yeah, because in anything, it's important to know what words mean and what we're talking about, and I think that is key to the issue. Because again, I will stick by my assertion that when we ask people, well, what's your opinion of capitalism? They have no idea what capitalism is.
I'm going to hold, and this addresses your original point, Steve. Looks like we've been teaching them wrong. Or what was your actual statement?
We haven't been doing a good job selling,
right?
Or
and
selling the virtues of capitalism.
Yep.
And to me, that exact point speaks to what you were saying, that these people may not know what socialism is, may not know what capitalism is, and I'm going to hold true. I'm going to express at this point, it doesn't fucking matter. This is what they believe.
Know what? There's a large... Keep talking. So, I'm on your page. I'm reading your mail.
So, and I brought this up a while ago, that the failures of the Conservative Party in Alberta have been twofold. An inability, and it's the Tory Party, the government, and the industry. They have failed to adequately respond to the discourse on climate change and the discourse on dirty oil, and they say, people who support them and they themselves, they rail about how this, that, or the other opinion about climate change, or this, that, or the other opinion about dirty oil. It's unfair to be tainted with the dirty oil. It's like, you know what? You guys missed the fucking bus. You missed the opportunity to have
this was my shot against the public schools. I would say that this is an absolute deliberate misinformation campaign on behalf of ideologically motivated education industry, which has deliberately obfuscated what socialism is and what capitalism is. The whole idea of the model of ideology being a circle is a deliberate and intentional disinformation. It's completely and totally inaccurate.
Fuck, that's the third time I've heard this come.
It is always presented as a fait accompli. There is never any alternative for it, and there is never, ever, was it ever presented to anyone that I know of through public education in multiple generations with any analysis whatsoever. It's simply say, this is what it is, memorize it, move on.
I'll tell you this. In as much as I went to university at all, got any post-secondary, and I got no degree, I got invited not to come back twice. The second time permanently.
It was strongly recommended by the dean.
It was liberal arts.
Yeah.
Right? I took poli-sci, I took history.
Yeah.
At no point in any of those did I ever have a prof that expressed anything like what you just described, saying socialism this, yada, yada, yada. Right?
Like they tried to define.
Like socialism is good. This is the only thing that happens that can be defined as let's move on. Just burn that into your brain and just don't ever question it,
Right.
That was never part of it.
I think most people, unless they're
because it usually happens at the high school level when we're introduced to the concept.
Most people are learning this in high school,
Yeah.
and are not, unless they're taking an economics major or something like
Yeah.
that, or a poli-sci major. They're not, even if they're poli-sci, they're probably not really.
Yeah.
Mostly an economics major, I think they're not
Yeah.
really learning the difference.
You know what? My favorite teachers in high school, and I mean, one was a physics teacher, irrelevant to this. One, my English teacher, and he was a draft dodger from Vietnam. In grade 12, he came out of nowhere. He was American. Amazing guy. After 12 years of school, he, in English 30, my last year of school, actually got through to me what the purpose of English class was.
What is the purpose of English class?
We don't have time for that. We don't have time for that in one episode, let alone
Or is it
this
like
one,
factual or like
it's
of life through literature?
I'd always been confused throughout school. Like, why am I taking language arts? Why am I taking English? Why do we call it language arts in middle school and junior high, and we call it English in high school, right? In all these terms, metaphor and this and that, right? It was just, these were just teaching points that never got through to me, right? But he actually made the connection to me in my head in practice,
right?
What it was, and it was actually a very simple
like
thing.
a utility.
He went and wrote on the board, Luke Skywalker, and he said, "Okay, let's talk about Luke." Right? He underlines Luke on the chalkboard. Look it up, kids. And he says, "What does Luke mean? Like, what's the significance? Why did he call him? Luke?
Why did he pick that name?
Right? And for the first time ever in English class,
Yeah.
I stuck up my hand. He goes, "What?" I said, "Well, it's biblical."
Biblical.
And he's like, "Spot on."
Yeah.
And he said, so I started to pay a little bit of attention. He's like, "Okay,
yeah." And then
let's look at Skywalker.
It's
right?
messianic.
And so he looks at the rest of the class. Nobody puts up their hand. I'm second time in my life I put up my hand. And he's like, "Well, it's kind of like miraculous, right?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "There you go."
Yeah.
Right? And then, I don't know, sometime that same year, there was a Joseph Conrad book we were supposed to have read, and I had not read it.
Yeah.
Heart of Darkness?
I don't know. The ship's name was the Palestine in this book. And so he writes Palestine up on the board. And he goes, "Well, what's the significance of that name?" Right now, I'm all into Middle Eastern history and Israel and all that. And so it's a constant struggle. He's like, spot on. Right? With all those...
Is that what Palestine means?
For me, like it's...
Well, it's a modernization of the word Philistine.
Well, no, I mean, Palestine has been a site of struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it represented in the mechanism of the book.
In the story, that's why the ship was called the Palestine, because there's a subtext of...
Sure.
Anyways, so that was my English teacher. Vietnam Dodger, none of that stuff came up. Right? My social teacher, he was great. Right? But, his claim to fame in my memory is that he used the same story every time. He taught the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution. There had to have been another one. So every time it was the same. The village had to send a conscript to go fight for the fight. So they grabbed the village idiot. They gave him a stick with the bag on it, and with the cheese and the bread and a flask of brandy, and sent him off to war. And he'd walk over the next hill, eat, drink, fall asleep. Yeah, right? He said this. I mean, that was so. No, in high school, I never got that.
Never got exposure to.
I never got that. Socialism is this, that, and the other thing, right? I will say, on the one hand, that people should not be surprised that the liberal arts at universities and academia are going to tend to be, and this has always been my assessment, more likely to express what you would call leftist thought, right? Because there is thought involved. And I don't want to sound arrogant by saying that, because I have in front of me, and I've always said this about you, the thing I respect about the two of you gentlemen is you are very well educated, very well versed. You have very well informed opinions, and very respectful,
right,
in holding dialogue on them.
Right? Well,
to me,
sometimes.
that is what that's
more
what
Steve than me.
That's what you're going to get out of the academia, right? It's just, and it's always been the case. You know, who did Hitler go after? Who did Mussolini go after? Who did Stalin go after? Who did Franco go after? They always go after the intellectuals, the poets, right? It's and the professors, because they're the ones who have the leading edge thinking, right? So are you going to get that coming out of the left?
They're rivals for power. That's another way to look at it. I mean, what you said, that you've noticed that throughout history there is, or at least from the beginning of the age of the academic, which we can say mid-19th century onwards.
I'd say 18th.
Academics.
You start getting Voltaire.
I guess, okay. Yeah, fair enough. But like from that age, that they have tended towards leftism. I've also thought that. And I've also noticed that artists, which is a similar concept, tend towards authoritarianism in their views, in their viewpoints, in their... for example, what got me thinking on this was someone made the connection that, with the exception of Rudolf Hess and Martin Bormann, who were just good old-fashioned thugs and cretins, everyone else in Hitler's upper echelons were all artists, or artistically inclined. Goebbels had a PhD in literature. Speer was an architect. Goering was a great collector, an admirer of art. Hitler himself was trained as an artist.
Yeah, Hitler was a painter. I mean,
yeah. So
what you talk about the tool versus what use you make of it. Having a degree in literature, that's great.
Correlation is not causality. I give you that. However,
look at Spain.
I just noticed a trend that artists tend towards authoritarianism.
The brigades in Spain were filled with poets.
Yes. Right? And the brigades were authoritarian.
They were not.
The leftism is by definition authoritarian. No, when Marx said dictatorship of the proletariat, he meant it. He did not say the consensus of the proletariat.
Authoritarian. Again, it's another axis. It's another.
No, it's a slippery dodge by you guys to try and avoid getting pinned down for what your true agenda is. Leftism is about power.
No.
Yes, everything. I mean, even in your own literature, if we look at left-wing sources, if we look at things like Press Progress, if we look at things like the Taillis, if we look at Mother Jones, if we look at Jezebel, everything comes down to power discourses. That there is no other action, there is no other dynamic in society aside from power. There's either oppressor or oppressed. Everything comes down to power in human relationships. And this is one of the big criticisms that, say, Jordan Peterson has brought forward of the left, in that he feels it's obsessed with the idea of power, and that this is way too myopic for a useful analysis of complex problems. I'm not saying I subscribe to that, but I'm just saying he's one of the guys who's noticed it from without.
I would agree with this statement, and yes, I have a lot of respect for Jordan Peterson.
Every single thing in leftism involves a level of coercion. There is nothing voluntary in the leftist state.
Okay,
nothing.
So let's take that statement, and let's not talk leftist state here. Let's talk,
or the leftist project.
Let's talk about leftists in a given society.
Yeah.
All right. If we're talking about power, right? If there is an, I want to say inequity. I want to make sure I'm not saying, because there's iniquity and inequity, right?
You want to make sure you're not backing up what I'm saying,
right? No, it's like iniquity is vice.
Yeah,
whereas inequity
is inequality of results.
Right. So if there's inequity within a society, right, there you are talking about power. That could be called a quote-unquote obsession with power. That doesn't mean it's an illegitimate focus on power. It's saying, okay, this is not appropriate. Okay. Right? And
why not?
Okay.
I mean,
why not? Okay, if
you're taller than me,
if 10%,
that's inequity.
If 10% of the people Well, it depends on, okay, what is the inequity we're talking about?
Sure.
So if 10% of the society owns 90% of the wealth,
Okay.
right, and the 9% of the society is suffering as a result of it, and again, we're obviously, we get a lot tied up in that bag, right?
Yeah.
Then some of those 90%, if they figure, okay, this ain't right, something should be done about it, right? Now, if that 10%, so there's your quote unquote obsession with power, right? And then if the 10% at the top don't want to give up any of that 90% of the control and the power and the wealth, right? Well, then the only way to leverage out of them is going to involve coercion, right?
But it comes down to who makes decisions in this regard and how those decisions are made. So if we take something like your 90-10 discrepancy here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how much of these resources should be reallocated? Which of those resources should be reallocated? And how are decisions going to be made when there are disagreements? And decisions are going to be made for other people. So in other words, this is not going to be a direct democracy where those 90% all get an individual say equally weighted. Somebody is going to be making decisions on behalf of that 90. And how are they to be made? This is where the true authoritarian nature of this project really comes out.
No, I think
it's where it really gets exposed.
It is unrealistic to portray every situation like that as necessarily authoritarian. It depends entirely on the structure of who's involved. Right, and it's been one of the I found big ironies of history, particularly in Latin America, when you look at it over the years. You've had Cuba's a great example because you had Batista in power, right? The guy was an authoritarian.
Yes, he was.
He was, and his government was corrupt. And it's anything anyone's ever accused Castro of doing.
Yeah, you could level an equivalent criticism against Batista. Right? Yeah,
so. There was ample opportunity. I don't know if it was ever presented to them, right? But that this is the nature of things. Eventually, it gets to a point where it's so bad, it's going to hit a watershed, and as it did in Cuba, and people are going to step up, and you end up overthrown. Now, what do you end up in the place? Now you've ended up with a communist system that you don't like, right? But there was never any provision for anything in between. So, and people seem to forget that there was this thug in power called Batista. Oh, Castro's bad. Okay, did anyone ever talk about the guy who came before him? Let's talk about Somoza versus the Contras, versus the Sandinistas who came in after him. Right? Somoza was a dickhead. Latin American history is littered with dictatorships. And what do people react against? They react against the few people who managed to overthrow one of these things, right? And somehow this is a leftist project. When the whole point is, it could be a more just society across the board, both in terms of distribution and free, libertarian to speak about communism being bad, and yet are willing to tolerate the dictatorships in South America and Latin America. It bugs the hell out of me.
Well,
right?
What? Because what are libertarians supposed to do about it?
Well, I find, okay, hypothetically, I'm not accusing you of anything, but I do see libertarians, a lot of it coming out on the right, and they're very much, okay, communism's bad because it shuts down individual liberties.
Right.
Yeah, and under exercise and totalitarian genocide and little downsides like that.
So all these things were happening under Pinochet, right? So if libertarians aren't coming out and saying anything about that, but they will.
Oh, they talk about it all the time.
Yeah,
but you got to remember the fundamental undergirding principle in libertarianism is the non-aggression principle. So libertarians, because
the right of your fist ends at the right of my face.
That's part of it, but also that the big part of the non-aggression principle, I guess, is just that and I'm not always the perfect subscriber to the non-aggression principle, but I'm losing my train of thought again. But I'm doing really bad.
Do you want a moment to gather your thoughts there?
I'm trying to do it on the fly, but the non-aggression principle. The point of the non-aggression principle is that it applies personally and politically, right? That the right of your fist ends at the right of your fist ends at the right of your face is part of it, but you're not going to make anything better with force. It's the acknowledgement that you're not going to make anything better with force and coercion. Mm-hmm. It's the understanding that it's morally wrong to force somebody. Because remember, from a libertarian perspective, it's morally wrong to coerce people, period.
Not only is it not effective, it's also morally wrong.
Right. So coercion, the only point that coercion, if you want to use coercion as a synonym for force, comes into appropriate moral place for a libertarian is in self-defense. Right?
Okay.
So if somebody is trying to take your wallet, trying to take your stuff, trying to take whatever, then you can use force and coercion to stop them and save your stuff or save your life or whatever. But coercive force has no place in the libertarian project beyond that, beyond defense.
So I'll apologize now for bringing libertarianism into this. It was a prejudice of my own.
You can talk about neocons about that all the time. No, neocons are happy to start a war any day of the year.
Anyways, I seriously take issue. You can't just take the left and paint it as a project, right? It has variations. Again, looking at Spain.
The ideology.
Spain had so many variations.
It always inevitably ends in... Let me back this up. Prior to the Enlightenment, the story of human politics was the struggle of one elite over the other.
Okay.
In the War of the Roses, there was no ideological difference between the Lancasters and the Yorkists.
Right.
None. It was just power. There was no ideological difference between William the Conqueror and King Harold. None. It was just one elite wanting power for itself.
Right.
At the cost of another elite. For the vast majority of the population, it made no difference whatsoever. Yep. Politics as we know it was created with the Enlightenment between the twin influences of the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment that said all human life is equal and no one human being is any better than any other human being. This changed our concept of what politics is and the self-determination of the individual. And of course, there was religious inspirations for this. And, how it arose, is another story. But that's where it came to be. My contention to you is that leftism, socialism, progressivism, all of these branches of this same greater ideological family are in truth a throwback to that pre-Enlightenment desire to simply wield power. That I will say to you that there is no difference in the motivation between a figure like Rachel Notley and a figure like Richard III. They desire power because they feel they should have control over other people.
Rachel Notley, but not Jason Kenney?
Enlightenment, yes, not Jason Kenney. In a post-Enlightenment society, you can't say, look, I want to have power over you because I'm better than you. I'm smarter than you. You're not qualified to make your own decisions for your life. You need me to make them for you. No one's going to buy that. You have to sell it to them on the idea that, well, I'm liberating the oppressed, I'm removing racism, I'm saving the environment. Whatever sales pitch, smokescreen has been used since Das Kapital was purchased. It is simply a function of two things: to fool the people you are trying to coerce, and to a greater or lesser extent, make compromises with one's own conscience.
Yeah, I think
there you go.
It's inaccurate to paint Notley with this brush and not any other politician. In fact,
well then, how is it? Just tell me where I'm wrong in my overall concept of leftism as being authoritarian in nature. Like when you have imagine the political spectrum as an A difference in where does sovereignty lie? What level of decision-making is supreme? The individual or the group?
Depends on context. I've always...
Nope.
Yeah, it does.
Nope.
Absolutely.
You don't get... No. You don't get to dance your way out of that one, my fine friend.
No, I'm saying it depends
You
on
got to pick
context.
one. Pick one. You got to pick something. Where does it go?
We've
Binary equation. Where does it go?
It's not a binary
If you had
equation.
to. Oh, this is so slippery. It seems that if I could take this moment, every time I get into a discussion with someone who is of a more left-wing view than me, it always comes down to that. I try and pin them to specifics. They try and dodge specifics.
Well, no. Actually, I'm actually arguing what you just said.
Okay. Well, then give me a context.
I'm talking.
Well, then,
you have to be.
Let's go down to that. Let's go down to that level. Give me a context.
I mean,
Let's get granular then.
and we've kind of had this discussion. I think. Yeah, we did last time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when we were talking about the pandemic.
Okay.
All right. So for me, there is a point where the
needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one or the few.
exactly. So taking the fist face reference,
Okay.
it was the biggest challenge of the pandemic was trying to figure out whether the fist of government intervention ended and the face of individual liberties began. Right.
So- okay.
And so that's why I'm saying.
So then,
it's-
how do
and
we
I'm
make
gonna say this just so this doesn't happen
for
again.
the many?
Right. I do not ever want
Mm-hmm.
because I feel it. You accuse me of being slippery. I feel
Mm-hmm.
it's unrealistic to say this is a binary. Right.
Okay. All right. Fair.
It's
Okay, let's go down there. So how do we make decisions? Who speaks for the many? Who makes decisions on their behalf?
well. Now you're talking about the
Practicalities.
development of human history, right? I mean, like it's a completely social
In
construct.
our concept, right here, right
Yeah.
now, Alberta 2022,
Yeah.
who does?
Who makes the decision?
Who makes the
for-
decisions on behalf of the people?
Well, the two parts to this question
Okay.
answer, right? One is the government,
Yes.
right? The other is how much, and this isn't just a partisan thing.
Mm-hmm.
It can also depend on the individuals who are in charge of the party, and then whatever
yeah.
the platform is at any given time. It's how much they want to be able to choose for the people, right?
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, again, Kenny.
Like,
I
what,
think
what do you
given
mean
his
by how
druthers,
much they choose?
Kenny would have preferred
Mm-hmm.
not to be holding over any control over masking and
Yeah.
restrictions and COVID restrictions and job
Yep.
site shutdowns.
Yep.
He would have preferred not to have had
Yeah.
to take care of that. Actually, I'll go on record now. If I haven't said it before, I felt sorry for Jason Kenney.
Yeah.
Because he was getting it from both
Like
sides.
kind of like a rock and a hard place
Yeah.
there.
There was no
Okay.
way he was going to win that situation.
Yeah.
Right? Because there were people, even within the Conservatives,
Yep.
who wanted more action, and there were people from the Wild Rose side of
wanted
things
less.
who wanted less, right? So there's no winning,
Okay.
right? So that's what I'm talking about. Some governments will want to exert more
Okay.
control, but that isn't necessarily bad. So here's another hypothetical for you, right? Let's just paint a brief reality where climate change is actually a thing. It's very severe,
Okay.
right? And it is known to be man-made.
Okay.
And it's gotten really bad, and something has to be fucking done,
Okay.
or the next generation on this planet is screwed,
Apocalyptic.
right?
Okay.
Someone and no one's it's like, oh fuck, it's gonna affect my bottom line, my
Okay.
shareholders and my employees and my
Yeah. Okay.
my home, and I don't want to let immigrants.
So
in,
there
blah,
are
blah.
individual consequences.
Yeah. So let's say, again, using the apocalyptic example, within 2 generations, there's just no life on this planet anymore.
So it's
All right.
stakes are high.
And no one's doing anything about it.
Okay.
If someone steps up to the plate and says, all right, you fuckers, you've had your chance, you can't be bothered, I'm going to make this happen, shut the fuck up and sit down. Right? That is a very extreme example of where sometimes
Authoritarianism is a good thing in your eyes?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's, in that situation, or say in the situation of COVID, where we say, okay, the needs of the group are paramount here.
Yeah.
We don't take the decisions of everyone in that group. We don't solicit their opinion and then write it all down and then try and make a synthesis or an aggregate or take the majority view. We don't do that. Somebody operates on their behalf, and that's the state, which is, say, the fusion of the public sector and the elected representatives acting in concert to a greater or lesser extent.
Yeah, I mean, that's currently the way it's set up because, if you can find me a better system, great.
Well, I don't think there is an alternative. It has always been this way in one way or the other. For example, even in pre-industrial societies, say if you looked at, say, Plains peoples at the very beginning of, say, European contact, the tribe itself did not make decisions where they consulted every single individual of the tribe and said, hey, what's your view on this?
Right.
The decision was made, say, by a council of elders.
Right.
In that case, they were the state.
Right.
So there's always a limited few. Whenever we talk about the many, it's not the many. It's always a few who make decisions on behalf of the many.
Yeah.
So you cannot say to me that, oh, well, this is better because it's the many versus these, greedy, individualistic few. No, it's the few versus the few. There is no moral high ground by this guy who says, oh, I'm acting on behalf of other people. No, you're acting on behalf of yourself, and you're using as an excuse that you're acting on behalf of other people. This happens in history over and over and over again. In that you get all of these great left-wing leaders who get up there and say, "Oh, I'm defending the people. I'm defending the many. I'm defending the environment. I'm defending the workers. I'm defending the proletariat." No, you're not. You're getting rich and you want power for yourself, and you're using that acting on behalf of some great other as an excuse.
I think it's inaccurate to paint every leftist
give me an example
leader.
where I'm wrong. Give me a very left-wing society or political system or an era where that clearly was not the case. Where those elites who controlled the government did not overwhelmingly benefit in every material and physical sense.
Oh, okay. No, okay. If you're getting into absolute power, corrupting absolutely, well, that's a different thing.
Okay. Well,
Tommy Douglas was not seeking power or wealth, right? And I'm pretty sure he never gained it. He is revered as a Canadian statesman and an internal statesman within Canada, right? And he was acting on behalf of the people of Canada, starting in Saskatchewan, right? But he ended up being, a national mover, right? Dolores Ibarruri, who was a leader in Spain, pretty sure she wasn't rich and powerful. She was a leader.
Yeah, right? They never really consolidated their hold on power either, though.
Well, if memory serves, she had to step up after the government essentially fell apart in the face of the Francoist forces. So I don't think she was even an elected leader. Again, are there going to be examples? Yeah, there's going to be examples all over the place, right? I think it's more accurate to point out that, again, on the right, and I hate using that term, but those with the power, with more power, and determined to hold on to it. They're already coming from that point of view that you're talking about, which is control and authority over other people and making decisions for them and preventing them from doing what they want to do. And they are as likely or more likely to use force to maintain that power. So I think it's irresponsible to point at the left and say, well, they're all about power and they're all about force, when the power and the force are already being used against the population by the people who hold them.
You know, can we go back to Tommy Douglas for a second?
Sure.
Died in 1986.
Okay.
Social democratic politician, Baptist minister, one of the great examples of the social gospel. Left federal politics to become the Saskatchewan CCF leader and then the 7th Premier of Saskatchewan from 1944 to 1961. Died with a net worth of $1.7 million.
Well, it's probably good money in 1986, too.
Yeah, pretty good money. And then another website puts his net worth equivalent at $8 million. Tommy did well.
Adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, Tommy did well in government, did he? Didn't he?
You know what? If you want...
How far above the average income do you think that would be?
If you want, you're always going to be able to find a detail, and as you just went looking for, to be able to...
It's just saying, Tommy
cut down the benefit of any person.
Tommy wasn't exactly a river to his people, now was he? He did well. He made sure his own pockets were lined.
Okay, so from your words,
like if Tommy had a net, was making like 90,000 a year as premier, you know what? I'd give you some credence on that. But I'm pretty sure you got a pay raise when he went from Baptist minister to premier.
According to you,
Yep.
It's bad to have socialism with no capitalism. It's okay to be a capitalist. It's okay for people to make money, except if you're a leftist leader, because then I'm going to use it against you because you're making money.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Because the socialist leader says everybody else is not allowed to do what I'm doing. The capitalist says, you know what, this is what I'm doing, and everybody else can do it. I live my life, you live your life. A guy like Tommy Douglas gets up there and says, no, I'm going to control what everybody else can do with their lives. I'm going to demonize wealth while collecting it for myself. Like the old phrase is, socialism or capitalism, or what is it? The socialists want capitalism for themselves, but they want socialism for the poor. So yeah, I definitely have a problem with some guy who gets up there and says, you know what, I want, like a progressive leader who says, I want to control what economic activity can take place in the interests of fairness. You know, that guy over there, like our discussion of the theoretical guy who's got $8 million and whether or not we should be able to
So hold that thought on fairness, okay?
I think it's wrong for him to accumulate wealth while I'm accumulating wealth.
Let me rephrase, all right? Here's what I hear you saying. It's like playing chess with the devil, because there's no right answer for you that you're not going to shit on. All right? No, seriously. All right? Well, I'm actually finding it kind of frustrating. So here's the thing.
I should tell you something.
So pure socialism is bad.
Yes.
All right? So if Tommy Douglas steps up and says, we're going to install pure socialism, I'm not going to make a penny out of it, so I'm remaining integrally pure, right?
Ideologically pure.
Ideologically pure, right? So you're saying that's bad?
Yes. It would still be bad. Yes.
So if he comes into place and says, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create a system in which, look, people can be rich. I don't have a problem with wealth, but I mean, there's such a thing as too much wealth. And it's, you know, we're just going to find some way to move it all around. And you know what? I can end up making some money out of it because you know what? I'm a good leader and
I'm being fairly compensated for
compensated for being a good leader.
Yep.
Right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Right?
No, that's still absolutely 100% morally wrong.
No.
Absolutely.
Why?
The part where he says there's such a thing as too much wealth. No, Tommy, you don't get to make that decision for anybody other than you.
I don't know.
Tommy Douglas can decide there's too much wealth for Tommy Douglas. He is not on any circumstances allowed to impose his values upon other people.
Okay. Let's talk in pure reactionary terms.
But that's because I'm going on back, like remember when I said the binary thing? Where does sovereignty lie? with the group or the individual. That's because I feel sovereignty lies with the individual without context.
Okay.
Or in any context.
Another extreme. Let's talk. Let's talk Braveheart here.
Okay. Freedom!
Well, earlier than that, the bit that starts the ball rolling. So
outlawed men playing outlawed.
So Longshanks sends his man,
the sheriff,
to go and presume. What does he assume? First night.
Prima nocta.
Prima nocta.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So here you have a guy who's decided that.
Like the
king,
the landowner.
The king has said, "You can go do this. I want you to go do this in my name." Right.
Mm-hmm. The line from the movie, of course, was the problem with Scotland.
This is full of Scots, which is probably one of the most famous lines out of that movie. Anyway,
so you have a guy, he's in power.
Okay.
You're saying Tommy Douglas, nobody can decide to stand up to that guy. He's the king. He's got the power. He's got all the wealth.
No, not at all. Not at all.
You're not saying that.
No, not at all.
Well,
in fact, the king is wrong for saying that he can make decisions, value moral decisions, and impose them on other people. The king is clearly wrong in that circumstance. Clearly, totally, 100%.
Okay. So why is Tommy Douglas wrong? Because I heard you declare that Tommy Douglas can never step up under any circumstances, make any decisions for anyone else, regarding
without their consent. Like when Tommy Douglas says, "No, there's such a thing as too much wealth." No, Tommy, you can't make that call.
Who can?
No one. The individual can make that call for themselves and no one else. No one is entitled to tell you you have too much wealth. No one. No one is entitled to tell you you're too religious. No one is entitled to tell you you are too conscientious.
So nobody's entitled to tell Edward Longshanks that he can't send his guy to sleep with someone else's wife on their wedding day.
No.
How are those even
because you got it backwards. Because
yeah,
Patty's argument is that the state has no more moral authority. To use the earlier analogy, the right of the state's fist ends at the right of the citizen's face.
Yeah.
Right? So Tommy Douglas as a representative of the state, as the premier,
yeah.
Edward Longshanks as the king, were morally wrong.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
So
No. Hang on.
No, but I just want to go back.
I feel, and I don't feel you're deliberately doing it, but I feel that the issue's being obfuscated here at a level that was not intended. All right. So let me take a step back. Private citizen Donald Trump, prior to being elected president.
You're right. Not Mr. President, not President Trump, just Mr. Trump.
Right? Says he can grab a woman by the pussy.
Right.
So what I'm hearing you guys say is no one can tell Donald Trump that he doesn't have the right to grab someone by the pussy.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't.
No,
he doesn't have the right to grab someone by the pussy.
Yes, he does.
No, that's assault.
No.
Yes.
You're
conflating the statement with the action.
You have just here's what I heard you say, all right?
Mm-hmm.
In this example, Donald Trump's decision to grab someone by the pussy or not is wholly up to him.
Yes. Yes, it is. He decides whether or not he will break the law.
No.
Yes.
Because the law is telling him that he cannot do something he wants to do. So the law should not, and the law is government. The law, the law should not be stopping him from doing that. This is why I feel this conversation is ridiculous.
This is reductio ad absurdism.
Well, because that's
yes.
Because that's why I feel you've taken the.
No.
This is a perfectly legitimate counterpoint to what you've said. You've said Tommy Douglas cannot tell someone not to do something. It is wholly up to them not to do it. So if that is not the case,
you're totally misrepresenting me. You're totally strawmanning me. You're totally and completely strawmanning me.
This is the logic of your statement. So
not even close.
I will put to you that if there is a difference between these two situations, it is specific to those situations. So you can no longer claim that no man has the right to tell another man what to do, because you're out, and this is you.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
You were saying Tommy Douglas has no right to declare X.
He has no right to make to dictate to someone else what is too much wealth. That's different than obedience to lawful authority. That's different than saying, "Oh, you're not allowed to assault another person." I don't understand how you can even remotely think that those two are related. Like, this is hard for me to respond to, because it's kind of like you're telling me the sky is purple.
Okay. So what you're telling me is grabbing someone by the pussy is wrong.
Unless they want to be grabbed by the pussy.
Right.
Grabbing somebody by the arm without their consent is wrong.
It's assault.
Yeah.
But
Because, again, you're infringing
Without their
upon their
consent.
individual sovereignty.
But telling someone they've got too much money is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's qualified to make that call?
No one, fuck it. Just anyone should have as much money as they want.
No.
As much money as they can earn
As much money as they can earn.
legally.
Oh, please.
That's what we're talking about.
It's
here.
wrong to, like, are you saying it's okay for someone to have as much money as they can steal? Exactly. That's absolutely nonsensical. You should be allowed to have as much money as you can fairly and honestly earn. It's wrong if you steal it. It's wrong if you kill someone and confiscate their wealth. Like, of course, that's wrong.
Every single
I'm
word
saying
that came out of your mouth in those, the honestly and earning
Sure.
and the killing and the stealing. I mean, those are all concepts that you could take and you could apply.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Let's apply them.
All sorts of businesses and all sorts of business practices and all sorts of people, and so now we get into the flip side of capitalism. Yes, her ladyship there was given some very interesting, wonderful things about the possibilities that exist under capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? But there's a lot of ugliness that comes with capitalism too. And they include a lot of the things that you just stealing and death, like profiting off of not, there are people who are not earning, but gaining from what other people should be paid and aren't.
Well,
right?
these
are all hazy concepts.
We should probably, yeah. So let's focus it down a bit. Let's clear some of the haze. What to you is capitalism?
What to me is capitalism?
Yeah. If a kid came up to you and said, "Hey, man," like say a younger child said, "We're going to be learning this in school. Give me kind of a heads up. Teacher said we're going to talk about socialism, capitalism. What is capitalism?"
It's the exchange of labor and or goods for capital. Is essentially.
I would say capitalism is even simpler. Voluntary exchange. That's it. 2 words.
Well, again,
If
Voluntary exchange.
that's
it.
yeah. It's
If I could boil it down to the simplest thing I can, that's it.
If I could, I think that previous conversation got us a little into the weeds, as it were. I was while you're talking, I was thinking about it, and there were some thoughts there that helped me. But the thing, capitalism, like capitalism and the free market. The free market is a part of capitalism, but the free market isn't capitalism.
Well, the free market is a theoretical construct.
Absolutely,
Free markets don't exist. Yeah.
No, but
just as a completely unfree market doesn't exist.
yeah. If I could, we could go.
I guess that would be socialism.
The free market
can't
yeah,
exist.
the free market is fundamental to capitalism.
Right.
Capitalism doesn't work without it, and the free market is the most democratic
Right. The invisible hand, as described
institute,
by
because
Adam Smith.
everyone who participates in the market, basically anyone who has to buy anything, gets a vote. They vote on what they buy, and that vote assigns value to the portions of the system.
Yeah.
Right. So whereas the directed economy instead, we won't say socialism, but the directed
command economy.
The command economy.
Yep.
The free market's an anathema to that. It can't have the free market because it's directed. So it automatically takes away that vote that everyone has. It's undemocratic.
Or at the very least, it greatly diminishes the vote.
Well, I have a hard time seeing an example of a directed economy that gives anyone a vote other than the people directing the economy.
True, but
right?
what I'm trying to say is, say like in a democratic socialist concept or a welfare state concept, where we have a great deal of capitalism, but overall within a large amount of government regulation, those votes are all diminished.
Okay.
Say like the classic textbook example is minimum wage legislation.
Right.
You cannot make a free negotiation between two parties as to one will provide labor and the other will provide compensation for that labor.
Right.
They're not allowed to make a free vote.
At an the agreed upon rate is the minimum agreed upon.
Somebody else who has no concept of what's going on in the business industry imposes a floor to those negotiations.
Yeah. Okay. Imperfect solutions to problems, right? So
I think
we've had this
very imperfect
I have to
solution.
respond to this, right? Okay, let's shoot down minimum wage. Well, we've already discussed the fact that the earning dollar has not risen to keep up with the cost of living in the last 50 years, right? That gap has just been increasing the whole time. Right? That's why the whole concept of minimum wage is even coming up. Now, if anything, yes, there are a lot of businesses that are having to suffer, mostly the smaller ones, right?
That have very narrow margins.
But our society has had the chance to keep up with this race this whole time and has chosen not to.
Has it chosen not to?
Apparently.
How can you say that with confidence? Like, how do we know?
How do we know?
Yeah. How do we know they chose not to? Or how do we know that maybe circumstances were such that they simply were not able to?
Okay, was it... I don't know. Seems to me a pretty... And this is where it gets into the concept of leadership, right? Who's been running this fucking show anyways, if that's the case? If we've gotten to the point where the spending point of $1 has not kept up with the cost of living over 50 years, right? That means the standard of living of your nation has gone down considerably, right? So, like, way to go, right? So in some ways, it's an argument, not necessarily against government, but it's an argument against bad government.
It's something,
right?
Yeah.
You know,
it's an indication that you're saying that this is not a tolerable situation,
right? So I just find I don't bring up minimum wage. Yeah, I get it, right? And this really digs down into the real fundamentals of what we're talking about, right? And we could spend hours talking about this shit.
That's what we're doing.
What is it supposed to be?
That's what we're doing.
Right?
It's called a podcast.
You talk about stealing. You talked about voluntary exchange.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When unemployment is high
Yep.
and you have to take a job,
Yep.
no matter what the job is, no matter what the pay is, no matter what the conditions are,
Or the-
no matter how much of a dick your boss is,
You're
simply because
saying-
you have to feed yourself. Don't even worry about having a wife or kids.
You're saying the wolf's at the door and the guy's like, I'm going to take the first job that's offered to me. I don't give a shit what it is.
Yeah, where's the voluntary of that?
I'm taking the well.
And the boss is like, the boss is a dick. I know I've got this guy over a barrel. I'm not even going to pay him his wage.
Okay.
Fuck him. I'm going to get 2 weeks out of him and then kick his sorry ass out the door. I'm not even going to pay him.
But that's illegal.
What's that?
That's illegal.
Well, okay. Let's say it's not. Why is the boss even hiring the guy?
It's capitalism, man. He gets something out of it.
Okay, so
He
he's
gets
getting
free
something.
he gets free labor out
He
of it.
needs this guy to do something for him. Maybe it's flipping a burger. Maybe it's cutting the grass. Like in this situation, it's like it's some kind of labor that's easily exploited, like a groundskeeper, something like that. Some kind of unskilled labor where the guy could exploit him. Times are really tough.
Yeah.
The worker needs, our situation is like, my back's against the wall. I'm going to take the first job that's offered to me. And let's say, he does get treated really poorly. What do you think his productivity is going to be? Do you think he's going to do a diligent, good job? Do you think he's going to really give his best effort? Probably not. And the second something better comes along, do you think he's even going to give notice? Or does he just drop tools and walk?
Again, I feel you're doing a little dance here and you're avoiding.
Because you are giving me a very unrealistic situation. Like the thing that you're trying to protect against. When's the last time that happened?
I just think, again, it's very simplistic to say voluntary exchange.
Yeah.
When there's like an endless list of contextual situations we could present.
Yeah.
Where
highly theoretical and none of them realistic.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely not. The situation you gave me, when's the last time that happened?
People who don't have their green card in the US. Okay. Illegal immigrants.
Okay.
People are out of work, desperate. They've got another kid on the way. They need whatever. It is the mind reels. There are plenty of examples throughout history.
How about locally in Alberta?
I want to back up to one of your hypotheticals there.
Okay.
Would tens of thousands of illegal immigrants a day be trying to get into the United States if there was a rash of people not paying them? Right? Because the word gets around, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So
if you had a guy who was employing illegal immigrants, say as agricultural labor,
and
he missed a payday,
he was just calling immigration instead, not that they do anything.
Okay, so philosophically, let's look at that. Okay,
because I've actually been there. I was one time the first time we hauled my dad hauled produce back from California. We were loading onions in Stockton at his onion place in Stockton, California, and we're sitting in the truck waiting our turn to load, and all of a sudden, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
All these people just fucking book it across the field in front of us.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, where are all these people going? Because if all these people are running, should we be running too?
Yeah, exactly.
And Dad's like, no, somebody called immigration. Here come the immigration trucks.
Oh, here comes La Migra. Okay, yeah.
Here comes the immigration. So it's just, and that doesn't happen anymore. Like, if you call immigration, they just, you're here. Well, we'll take you to court and you'll be back here tomorrow, kind of thing, or whatever, and then miss your court date or whatever. But back to the point of, if there was a rash of people paying illegal or not, or employing illegal immigrants for a couple of weeks and they're not paying
sharp employment practices.
Again,
but
I find myself on the spot because I'm trying to convey, and obviously failing.
The problem
so maybe I go in detail too far. But
where I'm coming at is you're making a lot of arguments about. You're worried about this happening, about that happening, and it's like, this is not shit that happens.
Yeah. I mean, you are in a tough spot because you're trying to defend what is really an indefensible policy.
I disagree. And in fact, I've...
Or let me put it to you this way. Maybe if I was in your position, I would defend it on a completely different means.
I'm just saying that defining capitalism as voluntary exchange...
Yeah.
That's already on shaky ground.
How so?
The term voluntary is a very tricky one. And to use Steve's example, all right, you're right. Okay, I used an extreme example. I need to be careful in the examples, because I'm not trying to be difficult here. And sometimes, yes, I get ad absurdio. Trying to make the point. All right. So you come to the States. Yes, it's better than where you came from. Obviously, people are trying to get their golden ticket across the border, get a job, because they know whatever they're doing, they're going to be doing better than they would back home. So when you talk about voluntary,
Yeah.
right? So there's voluntary on that person's part, but there's also ethics involved on the part of whoever's hiring them. So let's say that worker, he voluntarily says, okay, I'm going to take $2 an hour, right, to pick apples in your orchard for you, right? Yes, he is voluntarily doing that.
Yeah.
He is voluntarily doing that because that is money. It's American dollars, and it's better than what he was doing back home where there's drug violence, where there's political violence, where there's whatever. Right? So he's better off here. Right? I would contend that there's the ethical consideration of the person who's providing the job and paying them $2 an hour when they should be paying them more. Which in itself gets into Tommy Douglas's statement about being able to say you should be paying more. If, oh, Mr. Apple tree owner, you should be paying him more than $2 an hour, right? Now we're getting into some gray zone.
So
right?
we have a disagreement, and a decision has to be made. Or potential disagreement. A decision has to be, or we have a question. Let's put it that way, a question. And a decision has to be made. So who is best qualified to make that decision?
Simple answer,
Yeah.
right?
Let's start there.
Let's say I agree with you that the individual should be, in an ideal society, completely libertarian, completely capitalistic, right? Every individual should be able to make whatever decisions. It gets complex when we start working, individuals start working together in groups, and the larger those groups get, and then it starts to depend on the personalities, the ethics of each individual.
Okay.
Right? So
my question still stands, though. I mean,
who makes those decisions? I don't know, because we've touched on the concept of leadership.
Who's best qualified to make those decisions?
I don't know.
Well,
right? We've touched on the fact that you guys
people actually involved. Like when you say we have a group of people. So instead of just one individual who's, say, doing agricultural work for, say, a farmer in California. Let's say we've got maybe 60 individuals. 60 people. Again, I would say that, let's say those 60 people wanted to negotiate with that farmer as a single individual unit.
And now we're unionizing.
Yeah, we are, essentially.
Right? And 100 years ago, that would have gotten them all killed and buried in the same field.
Yeah, but it's
and
not 100
fertilizing
years
the
ago.
trees.
It's right now.
Right? But that's the point
so
I'm
then
talking about.
Who should make the decision as to whether or not those people negotiate as a single unit?
They choose from
I would
themselves.
say it should be themselves, not someone from outside. Say, you guys need to negotiate as a single collective. If they decide to do so themselves, then they should be allowed to do so. They are the ones who should make that decision. Likewise, if there's an individual who wishes to opt out of that collective decision, say, I want to do my own thing. That individual should be allowed. If that group of people form a collective, say a de facto union, the person who should negotiate on behalf of the farm, I think, should be the farmer, not some third party who is brought in from the outside. Again, decision-making should ideally be pushed down to the people who are actually involved, who have, to use the phrase, skin in the game. And this is where minimum wage is a problem, in that it implies or it imposes a blanket situation or a blanket resolution on all situations, even ones where it does not apply, or even ones where it is not helpful.
If I can interject, I think the thing we're missing out here is the understanding that the market-driven price of labor, that number, that price is not arbitrary.
No, it's not.
Okay, that number is
mathematically derived
by a very complex group of factors that the market is able to determine through
price signals,
which is the very democratic institution or method because all these people create the price signals, whereas the minimum wage is essentially arbitrary.
It is.
Right? And it becomes more arbitrary the further out you get from when that minimum wage was determined.
Exactly.
Whereas, because the directed economy can't respond to changing conditions the way the market can.
Yep.
Right? The market will respond virtually instantly. If there's a massive increase in the supply of labor, the price of labor goes down. If there's a massive shrinkage in the price of labor, or the supply of labor, the price goes up.
Here's what I just heard, right? Because we touched on this a few minutes ago, right? That the net effect of all those complex factors interacting over the last 40 to 50 years has been that what the market is willing to pay for labor versus what the pay for that labor will get the worker has drastically gone down.
Now this creates another conversation where I was talking about Marion Tupri earlier off mic prior to starting this. He's using a different a time price thing to determine relative wealth between now and 200 years ago. So how much time does it take to buy an hour of light? Now,
an hour of light?
An hour of light. Like how much time do you have to work to turn your lights on for an hour?
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So your lights use say like $1.
Ooh, that's complex.
It is, but it's a metric that defies inflation. So you don't have to do inflation adjusted time. So, for example, prior to the invention of the light bulb, when everything was candle lit, candles were very, very expensive. So a guy had to work a couple days a month for an hour of nighttime reading light.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas now, you've got to work to keep these lights on for an hour. You're probably only, what I get paid, I probably only have to work 20 minutes.
Especially if it's LED.
Right? Oh, yeah. So, where my point was. But the point was...
No, I think I know where you're going with this, right?
A way to measure...
It's a way to measure increased
costs that's independent of inflation.
It's independent of inflation, right? So light is cheaper, heat is cheaper, right? Like how much time you had to spend to gather firewood to heat your home versus how much you have to spend to heat your home with natural gas. It's vastly cheaper.
Yeah.
Right? So when you start talking about things in absolute dollars... It's not as good a measure as it could be.
Right, because you do have to factor in inflation and technological change.
Right, yeah, exactly. So...
all I can say is, because this conversation started, or this latest string of the conversation started with the concept of minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right? Minimum wage, as I understand it, the original concept of it was meant to be a living wage. Someone could pay rent...
Yep.
Buy groceries, pay utilities, own a vehicle, right? Have a family.
I don't know owning a vehicle.
Maybe not the vehicle, but it was meant. This was
afford public transportation.
You know what?
I think
this is still really good that you're mentioning this. This is really important, actually.
And the fact that we live in a society where people can't even buy a house anymore, right? Where the minimum wage, as it exists, and we're having this big fight about a minimum wage. And that doesn't even provide subsistence living, right? Let alone a family. For one person, it's not enough. To try and raise a family on it, no chance.
Okay, right? But now I want to because especially when you talk about not being able to afford a house, right? These costs are largely because of government, right?
Well,
real estate is vastly more expensive because
of government.
Because of zoning regulations, right? Like you can't, for example, the most expensive place to buy real estate in the United States is San Francisco. Okay. You can't build in San Francisco.
They've created artificial scarcity.
There's Reason's got a great piece from a couple of years ago about a guy who owned a dry cleaning place. That took up most of a block in San Francisco. He owned this dry cleaning place.
Yeah.
He wanted to bulldoze his dry cleaning business, rebuild a new building that included put his dry cleaning business back on the ground floor, and then had 7 floors of apartments on top of it, and they wouldn't let him fucking build it.
Yeah.
And it's not, and he was perfectly willing, because California's got regulations about low income ratio, so he was going to build the requisite number, or not really build, but price the requisite number of suites at the low income level.
Yeah.
And comply with all those regulations, and the zoning regulators wouldn't let him build it. So he's just got. And he was going to build like 150 units.
Okay. Now, is this government or is it fucking corruption?
No,
it's government.
It was government. It
was the zoning commission.
Yeah.
Because why?
Well, there were other interests.
You're saying they're artificially inflating prices.
Yeah. In that example, there were other interests in the community.
Yeah.
Which felt that they were benefiting from the status quo. And of course, this guy would have changed because there were other people,
fucking reactionaries.
Yeah,
other groups.
Yeah,
who
well, in San Francisco and most of the municipal California systems have a very low threshold for intervention by other groups.
Yeah, there were people who didn't want the neighborhood to change by the infusion of a whole bunch more people in it. There were people who didn't want low income people living in that neighborhood. There were other governmental agencies involved that didn't, that felt that their work would change if they had these people located in this population center than that. There were a whole bunch of other factors, and all of these people had more leverage with the municipality.
Yeah, well, like I say,
it was just
because
bureaucracy.
The way the system has, right, and it's the same here it's like doing big industrial projects here, right? Like there's a very low threshold for interventionism, right? So that environmental groups, or like you want to build a pipeline, right? You want to, and there's a very low threshold for environmental groups and other groups to intervene to stop the pipeline.
Yeah.
Right? Or at least delay it until it dies.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the same in most communities, and it's kind of a form of crony capitalism, right?
Yeah,
yeah. Crony capitalism.
So you get all these NIMBYs who are willing to become active and get in front of the zoning commission or whoever's in charge of the zoning regulations, and make their case that they don't want. And largely they're wrong too, right? Because they're worried about property values, or they're worried about whatever character in the neighborhood. And NIMBYs are almost, especially when they're worried about property values, they're almost universally wrong when they don't want other development, because the development more often than not ends up enhancing their property values. Mm-hmm. But when the system enables NIMBYs or other people to intervene, that to me is a form. It's like crony capitalism. To me, it's the same system that allows.
Yep.
Like in the video we were talking about, like when for the listeners, prior to starting this episode, we watched a TED Talk given by Katherine Mangu-Ward, who is the editor of Reason Magazine, talking about her virtues of capitalism and the evils of government intervention. And so her talking about like Zuckerberg. If Zuckerberg gets influence on the regulations that eventually come to regulate his company, to me, that's crony capitalism. And libertarians hate crony capitalism as much as leftists do. Yes. Absolutely. Crony capitalism is wrong.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people,
because it's not voluntary exchange.
Like I agree with her that
it's perfectly voluntary.
That General,
no, it's not.
No, General Motors should have been allowed to die.
Yeah,
should have been, right?
But I'm pretty sure
Goldman Sachs should have been
allowed to die.
It should have been allowed to die.
Oh fuck, they all should have been.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. You'll get no argument from me on that, right? They should never have been bailed out. But that's not a leftist argument or a libertarian argument. It's
it's definitely a libertarian argument.
We agree on it, right? What I'm trying to say is that it's something that we agree on. They should have been allowed to die.
It's not a point of contention, for sure,
right?
Let's step away from San Francisco. Let's use Vancouver as the example, right? If we're going to talk about government intervention or not intervention, because
Horgan just introduced rent controls into Vancouver the other day, by the way.
Oh boy, that'll help. That'll help lots.
Yeah, because my understanding of part of that situation is that a lot of foreigners, mostly out of Asia, were coming in and snapping up real estate in the GVA.
Yeah.
And
The problem
not
is
renting
really
it
that they weren't
out
renting
or...
it.
What's that?
The real problem with that was that they weren't renting
Yeah,
it.
they
Right,
weren't.
exactly.
Yeah, they were just
weren't
holding
renting
it.
them out.
It was an investment. It was a way to, I guess, hide money.
Now,
Yeah.
so without any sort of... So that situation occurred because there was nothing in place to prevent it happening. Mm-hmm. And now that's driven up the real estate market in Greater Vancouver area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And people cannot afford to live there. And that's without government doing anything.
Right.
So seems to me that's an argument for that's a good place for someone, and the government is well placed to be able to do it, to actually put some controls in place that you know they'd have to get in their time machine and go back.
How could we solve that problem?
I don't know.
We don't have enough. We don't have. I mean, for example, we got all of these houses that are in Vancouver, but they're really out of range. They're just not affordable for the vast majority of people.
Not even to rent.
So why can't we build new ones? Why can't we build additional ones?
Well, probably
would strike
I
me
would
as the
suspect for the
simplest.
same reason, because now you're going to drive down property prices for the people who have invested, and that's going to be.
Except you probably won't. You probably raise them,
Probably won't. You probably raise them.
right?
You think?
So if a developer comes in and wants to buy a plot of say 5 or 6 houses, bulldoze them and put up a 30-story
Put up a high rise.
high rise. That's one. It's probably because he's going to pay extra to get that block of houses because he wants a block, right? So which will drive up the property values around.
Of those, because now everybody's lot goes up in value.
Then he's going to build a high-rise building. So instead of 6 families there will be
70, let's say.
or even 100.
Yeah, say 100 families.
Say he builds a 25-story with
Yep.
10 units of floor, right?
Yep.
Right. Okay. That increases density. Now there's customers for services.
Exactly.
Now
If I
a
own
new- now
a
somebody's gonna build a new grocery
restaurant,
store.
I want to buy one of those places adjacent to that building
Exactly.
so I can put my restaurant there, and I want it bad enough that I'm going to pay double what his house was worth.
Exactly.
That's very localized.
Well, that's how this stuff
For the
works.
record,
Yeah, that's how stuff works.
That's how it works.
Everything happens locally.
So
I was
capitalism is the macro reflecting the actions of the micro.
Yeah.
Right? So why aren't they building more houses?
Well, there's basically simple form. Government isn't letting them.
Yes.
And government has a variety of reasons for doing
the
that.
government can't be the bad guy in everything. For
No,
crying out
not
loud.
everything, but it usually is.
But you can usually, when things go wrong with capitalism, you can usually find government.
You
as
can
the cause.
almost
It's never
always.
the capitalists.
Well,
No.
sometimes in the case of
Almo-
crony capitalism, the
Yeah.
capitalist has been able
But-
to weaponize the government
Right.
against his competitors.
Crony capitalism cannot exist without equal participation of government.
Yeah.
It can't.
Without government, there's no crony capitalism.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Crony capitalism
is-
cannot exist without
is
an environment of government
unethical
regulation.
capitalist weaponizing government against his competitors. That's what it is.
Yeah.
God.
That's not opinion. That's textbook economic reality. If you have a system of you can't. Crony capitalism cannot exist without accompanying government regulation to be exploited.
money.
Because it's what it is. That's what crony capitalism
Yeah,
Yeah.
Even money. You can't.
is. Right?
No, I'm just chuckling because it's fucking, sometimes it's not. It's part frustrating, part amusing that there's no path that this twisty, turny conversation.
We're causing you a lot of cognitive dissonance. We're saying a lot of stuff that you have been that you know in your heart of hearts, to be false, but you can't find where it's false.
It's tough keeping up with you guys.
Like you believe what they're saying is wrong, but I can't give an example of why it's wrong.
If
I've
you want to
been-
recruit another communist,
can't
we got another
refute.
channel on here that we can plug another microphone into. So.
Yeah, maybe give them some help.
Oh, fuck you.
Well, no, like it's not fair. It's like
No,
especially in
it's
this circumstance, it's too
you know,
unwanted.
I'm not even complaining. I've always, and even coming into this one, I didn't.
Leftism is a hard thing to defend, man. It is hard.
You know what?
It is hard.
Oh,
No, it is. Like to quote Thatcher, the facts of life are conservative.
you know what? I think it's always better to quote Churchill on that. Thatcher is not the way to go.
Okay, well, what did Churchill say about that?
Churchill said, "Any man who isn't a liberal,
Yeah, okay,
when he's,
I'm familiar with that one.
When he's 20, doesn't have a heart. And anyone who isn't a conservative by the time he's 30 doesn't have a brain." That I don't have a lot of respect for Thatcher.
I don't know why people have so much trouble with the Iron Lady.
I think, well, that's another story.
It's a
That's
separate podcast.
I don't want to get on there. Although it's a neat topic.
Yeah.
Like why do we passionately dislike certain political leaders? Mm-hmm. But it's really, really like there's, again, this is, if I were in your position and I had to defend some of these ideas, for example, to go back to minimum wage, I wouldn't try and defend it on its utility. I wouldn't try and defend it on the idea that, well, it actually materially helps people, blah, blah, blah. Because that's, as you found, that's a really difficult line to defend. How I would defend it is say, well, maybe minimum wage doesn't help people at the lower end of the income scale. Whatever. It's not supposed to. The purpose of minimum wage legislation is to allow the elites to feel better about themselves. And it does that very well. That's how I would defend it.
Listen, not everyone on the left is out for power. Not everyone on the left is just looking to pat themselves on the back.
Maybe not. But I tell you, your policies they make a lot more sense. And they're much easier to defend from that perspective.
That's not the point.
It's really, you're in a really tough position to try and defend policies for what they're not intended to do. That's really hard.
I disagree. I don't think you've proven to me that that's not what they're intended to do.
Oh, no, but I'm not going to be honest. I'm not going to. And like this is, to say when two people are arguing on Facebook, like say when I was arguing with your brother on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, you don't ever do that again.
Argue with your brother?
I cringed every time that happened, right? Because I love my brother, but he drives me nuts.
The point was never, ever for him to convince me of his viewpoint. And it was never for me to convince him. That was never going to happen. The point was for the third party who was undecided in the issue to convince them. That was the point.
Fair enough, but I think there's also an element and to our discourse, but not just to the listeners, that when you make a point that is valid, I concede that point, and likewise, and partly that's just as part of the respectful intellectual discourse, and partly that's because how we all become informed,
right? And
we remain informed. Like, oh, there's something I hadn't thought about before, right? And so I think in that respect, it is not about, I don't come in here intending to be entrenched in anything. I think you'll find that most of the time, actually, I've surprised you guys by not being as entrenched in the...
A couple of times you have. A couple of times, that's for sure.
And we've strayed so far from our opening statement because we actually got bogged down in...
Progressives want power.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, because what we were saying was the left, and I hate the concept of left. I don't like the concept. It's all wrong for us to be going and making blanket statements like that, because for me, if we're going to do that, then for me, the right is all about power too. And that's going to get us nowhere. And we got bogged down into that to the extent that we're going to have another episode on this subject line.
Probably.
Because I actually agree with a lot of what you guys, where you came from. These guys,
where I said that people really don't know what the hell capitalism and socialism
The kids, they don't know what they're talking about, literally.
Yeah, well, I was going to say something to that I don't know that our educational experiences are relevant anymore to what kids get these days, because I don't know how much, like, I know what I got taught in high school about capitalism and socialism and directed economies and all that stuff, but I don't know how much of that is still in the system.
I think most
But
of
we
what
can't
And I don't know that what I got taught was very good either. But
No, I think I don't think that's in the system. I think it is. There was limits as to what could be taught, what could be embellished about the Soviet Union when we were in school, because it was a reality. There's a great, from what I know from speaking to students that I know of today.
By the time I was in high school, the wall had fallen.
There's a huge apologia of the Soviet Union taught in public schools today.
Yeah.
Massive apologia, where like the obvious crimes, the genocidal tendencies of the Soviet Union are completely not mentioned. The only thing they talk about is, well, they really made great steps towards gender equality and equalizing, like bringing people up out of poverty, and like they had a lot of female doctors, like they really did all of that. So that, there's a huge amount of apologia for it, where there's absolutely no discussion whatsoever, and say, they had female doctors, but they also lowered the value of the medical field in society. And that's kind of why they did it. Doctors were nothing more than pill pushers in the Soviet Union. There was this little place, in the basement of Lubyanka prison, where they said, that's the tallest building in Moscow, actually, because from there you can see Siberia. They didn't talk about, or they don't mention the police state, the total lack of individual autonomy in any matters, right? They don't, the grinding poverty that the vast majority of people experience.
If I heard you correctly, this is just something. This is your understanding of what's being taught recently to Gen.
Well,
Gen
when
Z,
I speak to current high school students, they never hear of any of that. It's just not mentioned in their discussions of what the Soviet Union was, or the entire Eastern Bloc of countries was. It's just not talked about.
But is it because...
Unfortunately, the Gulag Archipelago was a little too long to be assigned reading anymore. But
that's true. But it should at least be mentioned that it was a police state.
Yeah.
And that maybe it did use a massive internal exile system. But that's not mentioned.
You don't know that that's not mentioned. Maybe the people you're talking to just haven't been paying attention.
It's anecdotal.
Right?
This is true. Very anecdotal. But I would think that I would have heard at least one counterexample by now.
It could be that the Soviet Union is just a paragraph at the end of a chapter these days. Maybe they're dealing with other things. Who knows, right? It was very important to us. From a military doctrinal point of view, it was important to us.
It was important to us. It was definitely important to us.
But from a Soviet versus Canada hockey point of view.
An interesting thing about the Soviet Union, about communism as a whole, right? Like, the only thing they could export, like materially, like the Soviet Union, the only thing that had any value to it for export was weapons.
It did export oil.
Not oil so much as wheat, I thought. Back
wheat. Yeah, Ukraine has always been an export. But the biggest value, the most money, the most hard cash they made was weapons.
I think it was weapons.
And it was the only thing they manufactured that had any value, right?
That's true.
Because wheat's a raw material, right? They cut it,
so
grow it, cut
petroleum.
It. Yeah. Right? So the only thing that they manufactured that had any value to anybody else was weapons.
That's true.
Right?
There were no industrial goods to the Soviet Union, like light bulbs.
Nobody wanted Ladas, right?
Yeah. Or tractors.
Or Skodas.
That's true. That is true.
Zills.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. There was absolutely no competitive value to Eastern Bloc manufactured goods.
It was AKs, T-72s, MiG-29s.
Yep.
I think we're going to have to regroup.
Okay.
We're going to have to circle back to pretty much our opening statement or our introductory paragraphs to this one. Because I think there is a lot of meat on this bone still. And I actually agree with you guys on a lot of things. I don't think they knew what they're talking about. and they're in for a world of hurt, and so society, if that's their attitude, right? I'd say the biggest discussion is, as I pointed out, why do they believe that? Right? I think that's the biggest.
I think because that's what they're taught.
I don't believe that's the case at all.
What do you think would cause it?
Well, all you need to do is look at the example of 2008, 2009, right? And a lot of stuff since then, right? We're living in very interesting times. When I look at things, I'd say actually prior to 08, my life was pretty consistent. Just when it comes, when I've looked at things, the economy, up and down. Politics, up, down. Liberals, conservatives, blah, 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 blah. Rinse, repeat. Republicans, Democrats, right? The bottom dropping out of the market in 08 really changed things, right?
Especially in the States.
Well, yeah, but we started seeing...
We were pretty insulated from that, but yeah, it was a big
in Alberta
thing
in particular, we survived 08. 14 fucked us.
Yeah.
But 08,
Alberta was about... Actually, I think Harper maybe doesn't get the credit he deserves on that. He did a lot to insulate the country because he saw 08 coming a couple of years prior.
Yeah.
And he was really worried. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine. He said he saw Harper say something that had worried him. And it was, are you worried about, like the leveraged state of the American economy? He was like, no, I'm worried about the Canadian banks' leveraged state to the American economy kind of thing, right? Like he was...
Also, we didn't have the same interventions in the housing market that had been building up for the prior 30 years in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely not. No. Our rules for qualifying for mortgages were definitely much more strict, and he saw that as an issue and made sure it stayed that way.
Yeah.
And in fact made the rules more strict.
Yeah, or at least... Yeah,
right.
Yeah, because like...
And then passed banking regulations to make it essentially impossible for a Canadian chartered bank to have what happened to them to the Americans.
Like in North America, home ownership was seen as an absolute good, that there was no downside to somebody owning a home.
Yeah.
That there were so many socioeconomic factors, be it marriage preservation, family integrity, education levels, that seemed correlated
to home ownership. So starting way back in the 1960s, they started more and more interventions to make it easier for people to buy homes. Yeah. And all of these piled up so that, by 2008... Created the housing bubble,
Yeah, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And thankfully, we didn't have those.
And that's like the 2008, because the big American regulation that came out of the 2008 crisis was the Dodd-Frank bill. Right, and I railed against that thing all the time because Chris Dodd and Barney Frank were the people responsible for it. Yeah, were largely responsible for the bubble in the last, the 5-10 years increasing. Right, like they were both head of the House. Chris Dodd was the senator. Barney Frank was the House. They were both chairs of their respective banking committees in doing those, and they both were dragging bankers up for them and demanding that they make it easier for people to qualify for loans and
even though they had no way of paying.
And then the two institutions, Fannie Mae
and
Freddie Mac, are government institutions, right? And they're the ones who largely contributed to their collapse or their failure to bail out the people. What caused the whole thing?
But that's my point. When you ask, what do kids in America in particular look at, right? Now, how many of them are old enough for that to register? I don't know. But everything that went with it, the think that goes with the thinking on Wall Street, just all the sound bites that came out of that, getting bailed out and giving themselves bonuses. When, in another universe, someone should be lining them up against walls and putting bullets in the backs of their heads.
But capitalism took the fall for those bailouts. When it was and this is what I mean by this is what they're taught. And it's not, when I say this is what they're taught, I mean taught not just by the public schools, but by the media, by popular culture. For example, what you're talking about, like those bailouts, were always presented by media as a capitalist thing. That capitalism was the idea behind the bailouts, when it's anything but that. What that video we saw, where she's talking about the concept of creative destruction, absolutely should have happened. That's what capitalism would have called for, is for those banks to go under, all of those companies to go under. Let them go, because or let them die, because something better will come up in their place. But instead, we took a more socialist approach, a more government interventionist approach, and said, no, we must preserve the status quo, because as she pointed out, that's what we in the state and the bureaucracy are more comfortable dealing with. We preferred that. They had their own motivations for doing so. They didn't want that chaos. They didn't want that disruption.
Yeah, but you don't get.
They wanted stability.
You don't get to paint that with a socialist brush.
Well, that's the government interventionist brush.
That's just as crony.
Well, let's put it this way: it's non-capitalism,
and
you cannot make any coherent argument that the bailouts were capitalist. They are antithetical to capitalism.
Not at this table. You're right. You're absolutely.
Like you can't. But that's not how it was presented.
And that's not how it's going to be perceived either. And I would also argue,
given the way popular culture paints an image of capitalism. You turn on any kids movie, and the bad guy is always some corporate hegemon. They're always villains. I have seen one movie in my life where a corporate executive was not presented as the villain, or a corporate executive played a role in the film that was not negative.
Right.
What movie was that?
It was some movie about, it was a dramatization of a real life situation where these whales were trapped in ice. And one of them was a calf. And these people were trying to clear a corridor to let them get out to the open sea. Right. And Ted Danson played a Texas tycoon or some kind of capitalist who had a very wealthy stock of money. Right. And he was bankrolling all of the efforts of this community to keep this corridor of ice open. He was paying for everything. They needed equipment. He said, yeah, write the check.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the only time I've ever seen a film where, the big corporate figure is not the villain or the antagonist.
Someone actually made Atlas Shrugged into a series of 3 movies.
Yeah, wasn't the guy with the gravelly voice playing one of the guy from Chicago PD? Wasn't he?
Oh yeah. No, he was Hank Reardon, I think. Yeah. So I haven't. I've managed to find the first 2, but I've never been able to watch the third one. But
I haven't seen it. I've seen clips, but I haven't seen all of it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but I think we're
so. Just look at 2008, 2009, and again, it's so you're right. That's cronyism.
Yeah.
But it might be perceived as a capitalism. Certainly, the giving themselves bonuses afterwards. That was a capitalist mentality.
It was painted as capitalist.
Right? No.
It totally
when guys get bailed out.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, the cronyism has occurred. They've been bailed out.
They never should have been bailed out.
All right. We all agree.
Yeah.
Right. When they took that money and gave themselves bonuses, that's on them.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
Sure. But
and it should have been pointed out, and they should have been finger pointed for it.
Sure.
And I would argue the argument against or not the argument against capitalism, but the black eye for capitalism, where people are going to look at it negatively, is all the activity that led up to that, right? Everything that led to the collapse of 2008. That's on them as well. That's not government.
No, but I've just spent the last 10 minutes making the argument that it was government intervention.
Yeah, how could it not be laid at the feet of government?
Yeah.
30 years of government intervention in the housing market led up to 2008. How can government now be absolved? Okay. Especially when we have that example right next door, north of the medicine line, where they did not have those government interventions. Canada escaped. Canada did not have that.
We had different government interventions.
We did have, because we were part of the downstream domino effect, in that, like, our interventions were in the auto industry. Because our auto industry is a branch plant of the American auto industry. Yeah. The American housing market collapsed, and it has a massive domino effect of everything, including the auto industry, which then spilled over the border into Canada.
Yeah.
So Harper bailed them out, and
No, I'm not talking about the ban. I'm saying that our government intervened and and created rules, and that was a good thing because it protected our.
Yeah, but it didn't have those rules. Were not the story of the American housing market from the beginning of the Great Society has been a series of repeated interventions to make home buying easier. Or no, I should let me rephrase, to make more individuals buying homes. It was a series of interventions into that market that Canada simply did not have.
Yeah.
And it was, and
we had less government regulation and intervention.
What they did was made it easier for people to go into debt that they couldn't necessarily afford.
That they could not support.
Canada's regulations made it harder to assume debt.
No, I understand. Yeah, I get that.
So, and that's, I mean, you can argue that you can argue about whether the intervention is good or bad, or whether the intervention is moral from a libertarian standpoint, or whatever. But there's only so much debt a person can assume before it's going to tank them. And so I certainly, personally, I have much less trouble with a law that makes it harder for you to assume debt, or harder.
And on aggregate, there was less intervention in Canada.
Yeah. It ultimately resulted, in less intervention.
There was much less regulation, bureaucracy, red tape, intervention originated by government north of the border than south. Yet, the collapse was laid at the blame of capitalism.
Yes.
And, and that was noted by many conservative or economists at the time, most notably Thomas Sowell, in that whenever government intervention fails, capitalism is blamed, and then the remedy proposed is more government intervention.
Yeah.
So just if memory serves, the government in question at the time, that was a Republican government, right?
It was.
When it failed.
But, and I'm going to say bipartisan blame, because there were Republican, like the Reagan government, all through the 1980s, did nothing to roll back those interventions.
Well, the
Nixon government of the 70s,
you got to remember,
did nothing to roll back those interventions.
You got to remember, Democrats controlled the Congress completely from Roosevelt until the Republican wave under Clinton, Clinton's first midterm.
Really?
Yep.
Both houses?
Both houses.
Really?
Yep.
No way.
Yes.
No. Well, mind you, how many Republican presidents do we have in that time period? Because usually the House and the Senate are opposite the party in the executive.
You got to understand, Roosevelt under Roosevelt, he had supermajorities in both houses for his entire term.
Okay.
Reagan.
Then after Roosevelt was Truman.
Yes.
Now, did he ever get reelected?
Yes, he did one of his own terms. He finished off Roosevelt's, and then he was elected to his own term.
And so he would have been Democrat.
Yep. And he had Democratic houses.
Yeah. So after that would have been Eisenhower.
Democratic houses.
Was Eisenhower a Republican?
Eisenhower's a Republican.
Okay, so that makes sense. If I got a Republican president, I expect a Democrat house.
No, it happened, but it was a thing. It was universal. It was actually a trope in American politics. Republicans could win the presidency and did fairly frequently, but they could not control the Congress for the longest time until Newt Gingrich.
That's interesting.
Became Speaker of the House in 1992.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Democrats control.
We lost the internet.
No, the computer.
Okay.
Did somebody trip the power wire over there? Doesn't matter. Yeah. Anyway, until Newt Gingrich became elected Speaker of the House in 1992, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives all the way from the Roosevelt administration up to that point.
How did Gingrich
pick up? The Senate sometimes shifted back and
they
forth?
had the Senate virtually all the time as well. There might have been a Republican-controlled Senate.
Every now and then, but they controlled both houses for the majority of the time, and they controlled the House of Representatives the entire time. Wow. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Because my understanding is that usually Congress is usually, and this was by design.
No, usually the president
against the party that controls the White House.
Yeah, usually the president's party takes a hit in the
in the
midterm.
midterms. Yeah.
If they take a hit, doesn't mean they.
But when you had
That's true.
supermajority, yeah,
That's true.
but it doesn't necessarily mean they lose it. They just
Yeah.
the majority shrinks.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it wasn't the swapping the House and
Right.
and stuff like that. That's a recent
Very
phenomenon.
recent phenomenon. That's quite interesting.
Anyways, for next time, I'm going to propose that the conversation is, why do kids in America feel this way? Mm-hmm. What do they expect out of that? Like, truly, what are they actually expecting to get? And how much work are they willing to put into it?
How are we going to
Right.
answer those questions?
I don't know. That's those are my conversations.
Well, I think-
points
I-
just
I
thinking
think if
about
I
it,
go to high school and start asking kids about this, they'd probably get arrested. So
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm just going to
Well,
take that the wrong way.
Thankfully, there's the Google.
I do think it's a popular culture. Like the easiest one to answer on that is the first one. You know, that it's a combination of education, popular culture, media. I lay the responsibility squarely at those three. Those three institutions.
I'm going to refute all of those, and I'm going to say it's my standard hobgoblins, which are a society that is used to doing nothing for showing up, getting praised for it, suffering no consequences
Yeah,
for
but
their
how does that
actions.
explain things getting blamed on capitalism? Or
It
a
means it
misunderstanding
means
of
them
capitalism?
going, hey, socialism sounds good to me.
In other words, like here's the in other words, the
here's
here
a bunch
is the
of-
free
here's-
shit.
yeah, here's the
school
free shit.
of
Yeah.
socialism.
Yeah,
That
Here's-
socialism means I get free shit.
Yeah,
Are you familiar with an experiment that was not an experiment, a video that was done on YouTube by the college, not College Humor, college campus freedoms or something like that. They went down to a college in Florida, and they interviewed students, and they said, "Okay, are you in favor of like wealth redistribution, to take from the rich, give to the poor, equity, this sort of thing?" And a lot of the students said, "Yeah, I am." And they said, "Okay, well, that's good, because then would you sign this petition calling for a redistribution of GPA? That students who have GPA, who have a more privileged background, would surrender 2 points, like on a stay 9, would surrender 2 points to students who come from less privileged backgrounds and therefore have barriers to educational attainment."
that's
And of
just
course the students-
sensationalism.
Well, no. It's
Yes.
a pretty good analogy. And the students said, "Well, no, I worked really hard for that."
It's a
Campus
debatable
Campus
analogy.
reform. So then the people said, "Well, then, okay, if you're against that, how can you not apply that to wealth redistribution?"
Binary, yes, no, yes, no. How can you feel this and not this?
Well, how would you respond to that? First of all, if you think that it's
What time is
it's suitable,
I have to be out of here in 13 minutes.
okay. If you
So
think
I'm not answering
if
that
you
que- I'm
think
not
it's-
touching that question with a
if
10-foot
you
pole right
think
now.
It's okay to redistribute wealth. Why can't we redistribute other things? I mean, is not GPA a form of wealth? And again, is that not in some ways, I'm being devil's advocate here, is that not in many ways a result of arbitrary influences?
Interesting question.
So why wouldn't we redistribute GPA?
Because we can't answer that question in 13 minutes.
Take a stab at it.
No.
Is it even theoretically possible?
maybe save it for next time.
Yes.
All right. We're going to call it there, I think, everyone. Thanks for
Thanks,
listening.
folks.
And we'll
All right.
try this again another time.
Okay.